that means history. I just visited the States. I was in San Antonio a few months ago,
To the Alamo.
and they took me to the Alamo site to see that, and I was very interested in. And it's a war. I'm coming from the security level. It's by nature interesting for me. And then I asked, how many years since then? They said it's about 100 and, I don't remember how, 150 years. I said, well, we speak about wars. When I drive from my hometown to Jerusalem, I live in Ashkelon.
Okay.
So we drive to Jerusalem, it takes me about 2 hours. So sometimes it's a lot of traffic. So I drive through old roads, Mikaela, that wars occurred according to Bible, which is wars 3,000 years ago. And you visit the same, just crossing a valley that very famous battles occurred there, and you just go to work. So that's, I think, very, very unique for us as Israelis. It's very for many Israelis it's very important, and for visitors it's a huge opportunity to see a different part of the world that has a long history, and the people are the same. I mean, we are the same people as those who lived 3,000 years ago. We are talking the same language. We are using the same words. And for us, it gives a lot of inspiration, that you are sharing the same values. The Ten Commandments are the same values of those who have started the Jewish heritage. So it's to be people that has a long, long tale of history of about 3,000 years. That's a benefit. That's a benefit. You have a scale. You know exactly when you are walking according to the scale, or when you are violating the scale. So it gives you a very, very strong reference, a written reference at the Bible. And I'm sorry that today Hebrew, the spoken Hebrew, is not as literary as the Bible. Because the Bible is a beautiful language. Words that unfortunately today do not exist in Hebrew and modern Hebrew. But for those who are keeping the right words, to go back to the Bible, it's amazing. It gives you a very strong and powerful inspiration. We are carrying the same names. My name is Abraham. Abraham Moshe. I bear two names. That's the name of my grandfather, who was in East Europe, and he was murdered during the Holocaust by the Nazis, together with all family.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just give you a formal introduction and then I'll let you...
Up to you.
Because I know you were telling a very interesting story, but I have to tell a little of your story.
In the Bible, we say there's no previous and later part of the Bible. So
it's a continuous text. So with that,
but feel free.
Okay, thank you. I hope I don't know if this goes on.
Chairs in Defense Committee and chairs the Subcommittee for Cyber Defense. Among the key roles, he's been the former director of Shin Bet, and also Minister for Internal Security, Minister for Homefront Defense, Chairman of the Foundation for the Benefit of Holocaust Victims Volunteers. So Mr. Dichter was born in 1952 in Israel to parents who survived the Holocaust, and during his tenure as the director, he's had an incredible role in dealing with deadly terror attacks, and he obviously specializes in networking counterterrorism against Israeli civilians, but also at large in the international arena. In September 2005, Mr. Dichter became the research fellow at the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C., and he holds a BA in the social sciences from Bar-Ilan University and an executive MBA from Tel Aviv University, and he speaks Hebrew, English, and Arabic fluently, which obviously helps in mitigations and various dealings, I'm sure. So thank you for coming and welcome to Digital Center for Israel Studies. Over to you.
Yeah, it's service. It was a few months post the war, Yom Kippur War, the 73 war. That was a very tough war for Israel. Thank God it was ended with a victory, but we paid with a lot of victims. And when I finished my compulsory service, I came home, and my parents both are Holocaust survivors who lost all their family during the Holocaust. And of course, as Polish parents, you know, they asked me, so dear son, where are you going to study to be a doctor? I said, Mom, I'm sorry, I'm not going to the School of Medicine. So she looked at me and said, well, a lawyer is not bad as well.
That's the next level.
I said, well, Mom, I'm not going to study School of Law. So she looked at me and said, so what are you going to study? I said, I'm going to learn a new language. So she looked at me and said, English is very, very important in life. I said, Mom, it's not going to be English. So what language the hell are you going to learn? I said, Mom, Arabic. She looked at my father and told him in Yiddish, it's their language, our child should see a doctor. Because for her to hear her son speaking Arabic, I was interviewing years ago. She passed away 4 years ago. And a few years ago, I was a minister from defense, I think, and I was interviewed by JSIA in Arabic, live. And I always kept being interviewed live because otherwise they audit you and they change the context, so I prefer to speak Arabic and live. So it was later broadcasted on Israeli channels, and her friend, they were a group of 6 girls at the age of 20 years old when the Holocaust started, and they were in Iran after they saw their family members getting killed by the Gestapo, by the Germans, one by one in the ghetto. They escaped, 6 girls. Can you imagine what it means, 6 girls, for almost 4 years in Iran up until Uzbekistan. So they are in very close relations. So whenever they used to see me speaking in Arabic on TV, or in any other language, but mainly in Arabic, they used to call her and say, Malka, that's my mother's name, we've seen your son, Abraham, and he speaks Arabic, wow. And my mother said, well, what can I do? So she was not proud of it. But I think that in our region, for me to speak Arabic, when I went to speak Arabic, it was at the age of 23 years old. Pretty, very odd to start such a new language. At high school, I studied English and French. But Arabic was due to my need to work in the Arab section in the domestic intelligence service. And I don't see myself over the last almost 40 years without Arabic. Because Arabic gave me the opportunity to communicate with many Arabs, including Palestinians, including with Yasser Arafat, the first chairman or president of the Palestinian Authority, and including with Mahmoud Abbas, the second one. It gave me the opportunity to understand them, but at the same time to see when they are trying to trick me or to trick us, or when I used to go with the Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, before was assassinated, later on with Barak, Ariel Sharon. It was a very good opportunity for me to define exactly when they're trying to trick them, to trick me, or let's say when they're telling the truth and when they don't. Anyway, let's go to the region. I am sure that we're all very aware of what's going on in the region, the Middle East, I know here you call it West Asia, but we call it the Middle East. And the Middle East, the large Middle East, is from Morocco in the west on the Atlantic up until Afghanistan in the east, and from Syria in the north down to Yemen, Somalia in the south. It's a large Middle East that up until 6 years ago was a normal area. It's a huge Middle East. It's about 22 Arab countries with close to 400 million people. To put it in proportions, we are the state of Israel. We are 22,000 square kilometers with 8.5 million people. In order to write the name Israel on the maps, you have to borrow part of the Mediterranean in order to write the full name. And yeah, it's very complicated for us. You can ski in the morning at the Hermon Mount in the northern pole of Israel, by noontime to get into your car, and to drive all along the Jordan Valley, and by late afternoon to swim in the Red Sea in Eilat. That's the length of Israel. The width of Israel is between 14 kilometer width up until 70, that's it. But when the Middle East started to shake just 6 years ago, we have understood that we are an island, a stable island in a chaotic Middle East. Because I don't know how you see the Middle East, but in my terms, we are going through an earthquake over the last 6 years. I don't know how much it's on the Richter scale, but it's definitely 9 on the Dichter scale. It's really a chaotic area. If we just start with Egypt, that went through 6 years into a revolution and a military coup. And the revolution brought up the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a very extreme movement, exactly like ISIS, but with more profound ideology, written one, started almost 90 years ago. And they came into power in 2011, which was a nightmare for the whole region, because its Muslim Brotherhood are one day holding the biggest country with 90 million people, with 1.3 million square kilometer, with the biggest army in the region, was equipped with F-16, the most developed aviation batteries of cannons, tanks, Abrams tanks, the Americans, and holding the Suez Canal. 2 years after, a military coup launched by the Minister of Defense of Egypt, Abdel Fattah Sisi, the current president, and the whole situation turned again. Syria, or before Syria, Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, who was the most stable leader in the region. Nobody believed that this man will be toppled by anyone. And I'm sure that we all remember that when he was toppled, it was ended like an anticlimax. He was pulled out from the drain and shot on the cupboard of a vehicle. That's it. An anticlimax. Nobody believed that Muammar Gaddafi is going to be killed, sorry to say it, like a dog in the street. Parallel to that, the toppling or the almost toppling of Bashar al-Assad in Syria started. The rebels from about 16 to 20 movements started to fight against the administration, the regime in Syria. And during 2012, everybody from the intelligence services, Israelis and Americans and British and French and Germans and Arabs forecasted that Bashar al-Assad has single months to be the president, and some others predicted it with single weeks. Iran, who at that time built the northern axis, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, understood that if Syria is going to be toppled by Bashar al-Assad, they're going to lose Lebanon because there is a majority of Shiite in Iran, a majority in Iraq, a big group of Shiites in Lebanon, represented by Hezbollah, the terror organization over there. And Syria is the soft point in this axis because Syria almost with no Shiite Muslims. It's a majority of 75 Sunnis and a minority of 10% Alawites who are running Syria for decades by the father Hafez al-Assad and then by Bashar al-Assad. So Iran poured in Syria the troops of the Revolutionary Guards Corps, but it was a different war. They didn't know how to fight such a war. So they grabbed Hezbollah from Lebanon to fight for Iran, sided with Bashar al-Assad troops, and Hezbollah blocked the aggression of the rebels, but they couldn't fight back. Then it took a few years up until a year and something ago when Russia, against all predictions, against all forecasting, Russia brought their air force, they built an air base and started to bomb the rebels, including some cities like Aleppo, and that made the change in Syria. We shall return to Syria later, but Syria, as a country that was supposed to be so stable, Syria today was 600,000 fatalities, mainly civilians. 600,000. Some people say more, but let's stay on the official number, which means 2.5 million injured people, 12 million refugees, 8 million in Syria, 4 million outside Syria, more than 1 million in European countries. If you go, Iraq practically crashed years ago, and nobody knows what kind of Iraq we're going to have. Meanwhile, we have from Baghdad and south, we have Iran is controlling this area. From Baghdad and north, we have the Sunnis troops, and in the north, we have the Kurds. Yemen, that was conquered by an Iranian proxy, the Houthis, literally conquered. And Saudi Arabia, who understood it's going to create a very tough situation for them, fought back to a certain extent and recaptured part of Yemen. So today Yemen is divided between the troops who are supported by Saudi Arabia and the Houthis, who is an Iranian proxy. Sudan, of course, crashed. I don't want to elaborate more than that. So if we just look around us, around the state of Israel, it's a real chaotic area, and to those who are arguing about whether we are at the beginning of the end or at the end of the beginning, I think we are at the end of the beginning only. Because nobody really knows what kind of Middle East we are going to have in the future. And we have ISIS in Syria, we have ISIS in Iraq, we have ISIS along the border with Jordan and the triangle border with Jordan, Israel, and Syria. We have ISIS in Sinai Peninsula that hit severely the Egyptian troops over there, and they're trying to fight back. They brought down a Russian plane that took off from Sharm el-Sheikh in Sinai, killed more than 200 people. So it's a really chaotic situation, and thank God in the whole Middle East, this chaotic Middle East, we have the state of Israel. If we were met here 6 years ago, I can assure you the first half an hour, we would start with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and then we would talk about the countries around us. But according to the situation, I think that it's impossible to start Middle East without describing what's around us and then to dive to the Israeli issues, let alone the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We were in Israel between since the Oslo Agreement was signed in 1993, and I was there. I was the head of the Southern Division when the Oslo Agreement that is focusing on Gaza first, if you remember, Gaza, Jericho first. I was in charge of the south part of the Shin Bet, of the Israeli Security Agency, and the Gaza Strip was the main part of it. So when Yasser Arafat and his troops came to Gaza, I was there. We, Israel, we had to hand over the Kalashnikov rifles to the security troops of Yasser Arafat. They came in 1994, and we thought that we are really about to start a new initiative. The first punch in our face was in July 1st, 1994. It was the second time that Yasser Arafat came to Gaza Strip from Egypt. At the crossing from Rafah, from Sinai Peninsula into Gaza Strip, we were not allowed, according to the agreement, to detect the convoy of the president. So the 4 black Mercedes cars with black windows crossed the crossing, and my man at the crossing called me and said, Avi, we have a problem. I asked him, what's the problem? He said, Yasser Arafat sits much taller than he did at the first time when he came to Israel 2 months ago. I asked him, what do you mean? He said, Avi, he's sitting on someone. Now, the 4 Mercedes cars continued to Gaza. We had to collect right away information, and in 10 minutes, we got the whole story. Now, listen to that. The convoy of the president of the Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat, is smuggling 4 arch terrorists, each one in a different car, and Yasser Arafat himself is sitting. The president of the Palestinian Authority is sitting on the rear seat on an arch terrorist Palestinian who is behind terror activities against Israel. In some cases, even Israelis got killed. Prime Minister of Israel at that time, Yitzhak Rabin, when he got the information, he said, I hope that Avi Dichter knows what he is speaking about, and that his information is accurate. I said, my information is totally accurate. And he gave an ultimatum to Yasser Arafat. Within 48 hours, all 4 arch terrorists has to be expelled back to Egypt. Otherwise, he's blocking the peace process. And Yasser Arafat expelled them to Egypt. No problem, nothing happened. That was, I think, the first signal that something goes wrong. Now, I think that we are arguing all over the years about how could we do it better with the Palestinians. And as someone who was there, I didn't read it in books, I didn't hear it from others, I was there. And I think that it took us a while to understand that we've signed a peace treaty with the Palestinian Authority that is not fully ready from their side to establish one Palestinian Authority with one law in both, one Palestinian Authority in West Bank and Gaza Strip, with one law and one gun for internal security. And if you ask me today, what's the main obstacle in implementing the peace treaty, that's the main obstacle. They don't even try today under Mahmoud Abbas. He was the president in June of 2007 when the terror organization Hamas took over Gaza Strip by a military coup. And for us, it was a very problematic situation. Suddenly, we are arguing about a one-state solution, two-state solution, but practically we live in a three-state solution. We have the state of Israel, we have the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and we have the so-called Palestinian Authority in the Gaza Strip. Now, it's not, some people are pretending to call it a shadow government. It's not a shadow government, it's a government. Mahmoud Abbas in Gaza Strip has less influence than you have, Rohi, in about the Gaza. He has no influence. You know, the only gate of products to the Gaza Strip is not from Egypt, it's from Israel. We have every day 900 trucks, full trailers, who are bringing merchants to the Gaza Strip from Israel. We thought it's going to work by putting Palestinian Authority policemen or other people from customs to be deployed on our crossings. The Palestinian Gaza Strip, Hamas rejected it. So Mahmoud Abbas couldn't do it. Mahmoud Abbas is today 81 years old. At the age of 81, it's hard to believe that he is going to be initiative and to create some new steps. And the question is, the inevitable question is, so what's going to happen in the future? What kind of Palestinian Authority we are going to confront or to talk with? About what? So that's a good question, and I personally, I do believe that we have to insist that we shall continue to talk with one Palestinian Authority on both West Bank and Gaza Strip, one PA that has one law and one gun for internal security. Meanwhile, the Gaza Strip became land with military capabilities. Can you imagine that over the last decade, from Gaza Strip towards Israel, they launched 15,000 rockets. 15,000 rockets. The rockets were smuggled from Iran via Sinai into Gaza. In the 2 years where the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas in Gaza Strip affiliated with Muslim Brotherhood. So Hamas, during the 2 years that the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt took over, Hamas smuggled into the Gaza Strip from Iran the machines that are able to build and to produce the sophisticated weapon. That's why today they can do it by themselves, although they are limited with the raw materials. But practically we are talking with Mahmoud Abbas only about the West Bank. Gaza Strip, it's a terror entity that the only way that you can talk is just on specific items or about products, but not about a real solution, because we don't want to divide our talks with Gaza on one hand and with the West Bank on the other hand, with different regimes. That's not going to work. And the question is, what's going to be in the future with the Palestinian Authority? What kind of Palestinian Authority is going to be established in the future? Is it going to be one part, or we have to go back to the first step when we started the Oslo agreement? Meanwhile, the State of Israel, and by all means, I think it's a very developed country. It's a kind of a laboratory. I just met yesterday with your Minister of Foreign Affairs, or Deputy, Mr. Akbar, and I told him we are a kind of a laboratory. It's a lab that, with 8.5 million people, you can do, you can maneuver like a speedboat. You are India, you are a carrier. It's a huge vessel. To turn it takes time. And Israel, it's a speedboat, that you can do it right away. And that's why I think that in Israel we are trying to find solutions very fast that gives us some answers to some very significant problems. And no doubt that we are different, totally different compared to the region that we are living in, but we are living there. When you want to leave India, so you can do it by boats, by flights, by car. In Israel, the only way to live is to take a flight, because we don't go by car anywhere. We don't go to Jordan, we don't go to Syria, of course, we don't go to Lebanon, we don't go to Egypt. That's a sad situation for us. And we're a kind of an isolated island, surrounded with hostile countries. It's not easy to live in an area that, although we have some significant improvements in the relations with the Saudis, the Gulf countries, the Emirates, but it's all under the table. They don't want it to be fully transparent. Whenever Israelis are going there, even if they go with their Israeli passports, they cannot talk about it, they cannot write about it, they cannot broadcast it. I hope that one day it will be changed, because there are some common interests that we share with our neighbors. I think that a year ago, less than a year ago, 19 Arab countries, 19 Arab countries defined Hezbollah as a terror organization. 19 out of 22 Arab countries. It never happened before. The three countries who didn't define Hezbollah as a terror organization are Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. The three countries are dominated by Iran, so it's obvious. But 19 Arab countries who are defining Hezbollah as a terror organization, that's something very, very important, very significant. Second, we are sharing a common threat by Iran. When Iran talks about nuclear capabilities, we do know that the threat is not just against the state of Israel, although the intention that is broadcasted, as the president of Iran stated it loud and clear, we intend to destroy the state of Israel. And those who didn't understand it, so they can read it on the missiles that they are practicing every few months. It's written on the missile. This missile is built in order to destroy the state of Israel. Now, with a missile and a regular warhead, there's no way to destroy the state of Israel. But nuclear capabilities, it's different. Now, the scale of quarter of a ton bomb, half-ton bomb, 2-ton bombs, nuclear bomb, it's not one scale. The nuclear belongs to a total different scale. So that's why Israel is very nervous, and not only Israel. If you ask the Egyptians, if you ask the Saudis, they will tell you that they are very, very nervous, even more than the state of Israel. Because we are developing counter missile, long-range missiles that we are building in Israel, the Arrow, as you probably heard. But when you are hearing about an intention to destroy the state of Israel, so you seek to find what are the capabilities. Once Iran is developing nuclear bombs, that's something that combines intention and capabilities. It's a threat. In my security life, I've learned when you define both conditions, capabilities and intention, you better be well prepared for it. So that's the situation. Meanwhile, in economy, I know that it's a bit complicated to talk about it, because once you land in Israel, it will be very clear. It's a very developed country. First of all, because our needs push us to do it. We have a lack of water. We don't have water, monsoon water, rains like you have here. We were for decades in a shortage of water, up until we decided no more. And a decade ago, we started with desalinate water. And during the last 6-7 years, we don't have a lack of water. We pay a bit more, but we recycle water with desalinate water, and we have enough water for use, for agriculture. Cyber threat, that became the threat of the new millennium, because the more you are digitized, and I know that India is very well digitized, computerized, Israel is very well computerized as well. And for the first time in Israel, we started to build a defense system before we were hit by our enemies. Because all other defense systems used to be built post an event. Our sportsmen were murdered in Munich in 1972. We built a system how to defend ourselves. Our embassy was taken in Bangkok in 1972. We've built a system. Our aviation El Al flight was hijacked in 1968. Since then, we started to build guards, air marshals on board. I myself started my career in 1974. It's 43 years ago as an air marshal on Israeli flights. Beautiful job.
Post Entebbe?
No, Entebbe was 76.
Or before this?
Before that, the first Israeli flight was hijacked in 1968.
68, yeah.
When they tried to hijack again in 1970, they hijacked 5 planes. TWA Americans, Swissair, and 2 other European, and El Al. El Al from Amsterdam to New York. The 4 other airplanes were taken to Jordan and exploded there after evacuating with the passenger. The 5th one was hijacked by 2 Palestinian terrorists, were 20 minutes after takeoff. the air marshal killed the terrorist, and the female terrorist with 2 hand grenades with no safe. She didn't explode them. She gave it to the air marshal. He put the safe inside, and that's the only plane that survived the event. So since then, we know how to protect our aviation. In cyber, for the first time, we decided to build a defensive system before any attack. And that's how it's getting developed in very enormous steps, very significant. We have very good companies who are teaching and producing the defense systems, and so on and so on. I think that due to the lack of water, we've developed a system of irrigation for years that we use it all over. I know that in India even it's very popular. And we've learned to take, if you have a piece of land big as this table, that gives you 1 ton of peppers or tomato. So we've learned how to take this piece of table and to produce 10 times more in third water, but with building a greenhouse and with the same number of farmers. But that's why when you need, you know how to do it. But the rest, I'm sure you'll see it once you come to Israel, and I hope you're going to come to Israel. I suggest I'll stop here and allow people to ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Dichter, thank you so much for your talk.
I'll open up with a couple of questions myself, and then I'll leave it to the floor.
need a sheet of paper.
So the first one is you changed from Kadima to Likud in 2012. I would like to know why. That's next question is Israel, in both its capabilities, intentions, and as you mentioned, new regionalism in the 21st century is surrounded in a very chaotic place, but it knows better and it is far more equipped. So when we look at a very tumultuous subject like the occupation, you recently mentioned in our BBC Hot Talk interview that in the Middle East you first suspect a person and then respect the person, and that I found very interesting. But this question of a referendum with Israeli people weighing the options about the occupation in their 51st year, I mean, how do you see it as a negotiator who's seen a lot of history in the making? What does it hold for Israel in the 21st century? Because Israel should know better, and Israel knows better. So, if you could respond.
Yeah, well, it's a two question, one of them for a seminar. But I'll try to be as short as possible. First of all, about myself, I finished 33 years of military and security service. During this time in Israel, you're not allowed to be involved in politics, and nobody knows what's your political personality. When I finished, Ariel Sharon, the Prime Minister, split from Likud party and tried to build a centrist party. Because at that time we had the rightist party, center right and center left. Labour Party was center left, Likud was center right, and he understood that they are grabbing him too right, and he decided to form a new party. I joined him. Unfortunately, before the elections, he lost consciousness, and the whole system got changed, and we had another Prime Minister, Dolmer, and we won the election, and I was appointed as the Minister of Homeland Security. I continued more than 3 years in this job, and then the next elections we failed by Tzipi Livni as our leader to form the government, and Bibi Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister since then, formed the government, and we were in the opposition. I tried to change some issues in the party because I told them that I'm afraid that we are the Titanic. We see the iceberg in front of us, and we are still continuing the same direction. And I am ready to do everything but not to commit suicide. And I understood that we are going to crash into the iceberg, and when I understood that there's no way to, neither with Tzipi Livni nor with her successor, Shaul Mofaz, I decided to quit because I knew that this party is going to be ended. And I left, I became the Minister of Home Front Defense, and later on joined the Likud Party, and since then I'm in the Likud Party. By the way, we have primaries at the Likud Party. I failed to enter the first time. I needed 380 votes more than I got. I got 21,000 something. And I went to be voluntarily head chairman of the Foundation for Benefits of Holocaust Survivors. That's something for my own soul. And then, since then, I'm in Likud Party. I'm a center-right political person. That's my thoughts. That's my political arena. And that's the way I think we can solve better the Israelis' problems. About the neighbors, and mainly the Palestinian neighbors around us. With your permission, Rohi, I would like to widen a little bit the short history, because whenever we speak about our history, people are mentioning 67 line, as if the 1967 year started our modern history. I don't want to go 3,300 years ago. I just want to go to the modern history, the last 100 of years. Exactly 100 years ago, the Foreign Minister of England, Lord Balfour, gave a declaration about the right of the Jewish people to have their own land in Israel. Exactly 100 years ago. So that was the first phase. The second phase, which is very, very important to know, and I'm sure that you've learned about it, is exactly 70 years ago. November 1947, a partition plan was put in front of both Israelis and Arabs. By the way, the word Palestinian didn't exist at that time. They put a partition plan in front of both sides, Jews and Arabs. The partition plan said as follows: 55% of the land to the Jews, 45% of the land to the Arabs, and above all, Jerusalem is not under Israeli sovereignty but under international supervision. You cannot imagine what does it mean for Israelis and for Jews to get piece of land with not supervision on Jerusalem. But nevertheless, 2 years after the Holocaust, we were ready to get anything. And we accepted it. The United Nations Assembly voted for it, and we accepted it. The Arab rejected it, invaded with 7 armies of 7 countries: Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi, Iraq, and Yemen. Invaded into Israel in order to get 100% of the land and to finish the Jewish existence in this region. And we entered our independence war. We fought for more than a year. We have lost 1% of the Israeli population at that time in Israel. We've lost 6,000 people amongst 600,000 people. It's a nightmare. In 1949, the war was ended. We got 78% of the land and a very small part of Jerusalem, small part without the most holy places for Judaism. If you ask why we don't have a foreign embassy, an Indian or American or any other embassy in Jerusalem, it's because of the partition plan. But we accepted it. The 67 line practically was put on the maps in 1948, post a very bloody independence war. Thank God we won the war. As I told you, 78% of the land we kept for us. In 1967, it's only the third phase of modern history. The third, 1967, that we hear it as if it's the first phase. No, it's the third phase. In 1967, Egypt decided to wage a war against Israel. The Egyptian leader at that time, the president Gamal Abdel Nasser, he blocked the Red Sea, didn't allow Israeli vessels to go from the Indian Ocean into Eilat, the Israeli southern village, And he kicked off all United Nations security troops from Sinai and Gaza Strip. We were about to be attacked by Egypt. As we say in our heritage, before they are going to have us for dinner, we are going to have them for lunch. So that's why we opened the war against Egypt. We warned the Jordanian king at that time, King Hussein, do not open fire because we don't have any intention to do anything against Jordan. King Hussein, by a miscalculation, heard from Egypt that they are doing well in the war against Israel, which was a lie, by the way. So he believed and trusted Gamal Abdel Nasser, and he decided to open fire to get back the small piece of Jerusalem that he lost during the independence war, our independence war. When they opened fire, we had no option. We fought back, and we took the whole West Bank, including Jerusalem, including the most holy places for Judaism. That's the 67 line. So today when we are arguing about, and that's, I promise you, if you come to Israel, I will take you personally. That's my promise. I will take you personally to see what does mean 67 line in Jerusalem.
Okay, good. I'll take the offer. I'll come.
So
I'm
will I
landing on the
actually.
12th of May.
You don't know where you've gotten to now.
I'm 12th of May, I'm
There
in
is no
Jerusalem.
negotiation.
Trust me, I'm doing it every week, and I'll be more than delighted to do it with you.
I will
In one group, in several groups. What I mean, Jerusalem today, the 67 line, inside Jerusalem, we have today, March 2017, we have 260,000 Jews beyond 67 line, and only 240,000 Jews inside the 67 line. So those who believe, predict, dream that Israel will go back in Jerusalem to the 67 line, forget it. It's impossible. Even, I don't know who is going to be the prime minister. It's not going to happen. No way. You know, Prime Minister Shimon Peres, the late, used to say, you can have an omelet from 2 eggs. You can never have 2 eggs for an omelet.
Yes, exactly.
No way to get back to Jerusalem. And I hope that countries, here that we have a new initiative by the new administration in the US to move the embassy to Jerusalem. I hope that this will be followed by more and more embassies, including the embassy of India. I think that it's a miscalculation of history to it's a miscalculation of history. It's absurd. It's really an absurd. So I think that when we started our negotiations with our partners, as we all remember, we have reached, if I remember, it was a very generous offer, not as Israelis described it, as Americans described it, and some Palestinians described it. But I think that Yasser Arafat was not ready. Same as Mahmoud Abbas is not ready to do what is needed to be done in order to move forward in such a negotiation. Over the years, we've started to see the second intifada, the bloody terror attacks, and mainly the split of the Gaza Strip to a third entity. So I think that up until we won't be able to see a new initiative. Because Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, he was elected the first time as president in January 2005. The second time he was elected is January 2005 as well. It means that he was elected first and last time 12 years ago. Can you imagine? He's the president with no elections. I'm telling you, a king doesn't have such authorization like Mahmoud Abbas. And the parliament, the Palestinian parliament, was elected in 2006. Since then, no election. And it's not because we are not allowing them to have elections. So I don't think that Mahmoud Abbas at the age of 81 is going to run elections. So that's why we are all waiting. And people are talking, but practically it's nothing serious on the ground. So there's a new initiative by the United States now. We have to hear, to listen, to see how it's going to be promoted. But as I told you, we cannot accept, as far as I can say it, we cannot accept a situation that we have signed a peace treaty with Palestinian Authority, one Palestinian Authority in West Bank and Gaza Strip, and now we shall negotiate with two Palestinian authorities that have no connection between each other, and we, Israel, we are supposed to carry this problem of the independent Gaza Strip on our back. To those who predict that Gaza Strip problem will be solved by Egypt, they simply are not familiar with history. Gaza Strip was dominated by Egypt in 20 years, from 48 to 67. Unlike Jordan, who gave Jordanian ID to the Palestinians in the West Bank, and King Hussein took it back when he cut all ties in 1988, and he took back all IDs from the Palestinians in the West Bank, Egypt never gave Egyptian IDs to the Palestinians in Gaza Strip. And those who told me here and there that Egypt will donate a piece of land from Sinai in order to solve the density in Gaza Strip, I'm telling you, they will convert Judaism before, they told me, we shall convert Judaism before we're going to give a piece of land from Sinai to the Palestinians. So we cannot negotiate with two entities that one has no obligation to us, and it's an entity of terror. It's by definition. So we are stuck, and when you don't have a solution, you have to manage the problem up until you find some solutions. Please.
You did give a background, but
And that was very legitimate. Thank you for the answer. But my question was more towards tackling assumptions about the occupation. What Israel can do to its own people. Can a referendum not be opened up where for the Israeli citizens to assess or have an opinion in the most democratic way? Because this is perhaps the only democratic state in the Middle East.
We are a democratic state. We don't have the Palestinians to agree or to disagree with the fact that we are a democratic state. West Bank and Gaza Strip are areas that, according to the agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, still exist. It was not cancelled, neither by us nor by them. But the Oslo Agreement and the later on agreement in Washington and in Egypt and Cairo didn't close the whole issue. That's maybe one of the obstacles of the Oslo Agreement, that it covered parts of it, but not all of it. Unlike the agreement with Egypt that created 3 to 4 phases, you knew exactly what's their performance during the first hours, and then we move to phase B. You know what are the performance of them that they have to show and what's ours, and then you move to C and finally to D. It happened with Egypt, and that's how it brought the agreement with Egypt to a full and comprehensive peace treaty. We don't have it with the Palestinians. We don't have it because it was not signed. And meanwhile, we cannot accept now a situation that, all right, let's talk about the West Bank and Gaza Strip will be later. Because that's impossible. So we have 4 million Palestinians in West Bank and Gaza Strip. As I told you, Gaza Strip, we are not in Gaza Strip since September 2005. We are not in Gaza Strip with not one soldier and one civilian, and we are exactly on the 67 line in Gaza Strip. Nevertheless, in response, we got an entity of terror. So we have to be very careful about it. And
okay, thank you very much. We'll open the floor to questions.
Professor Kumarsan?
Taking the time to the mark a little bit, but can you share some of your best experience as a diplomat? Behind the scenes. For us, that would be more exciting. In the sense, tell us something which you can share with us. You said you spent your time from Rabin, Shimon Peres, Behbud Barak, and Sharon. But most interesting in your assessment.
I'll give you 3 true stories. that happened with me. The first one was in April 2002. If you remember, we were running the operation of defensive field operation because we've suffered so many fatalities, injuries due to suicide bombers that we couldn't continue just to defend ourselves. We had to move to offensive and post a very horrible suicide bombing that occurred in 27th of March 2002 in Park Hotel, in a hotel in Israel, that in the middle of the ceremony, a suicide bomber entered, detonated himself, and killed 30 people, families, and injured 150. It was the last straw. Then we've decided to invade the whole cities, villages, refugee camps in the West Bank, because more than 90% of our casualties and more than 90% of the terror activities were from and in the West Bank. And in fighting terrorists, there is a very basic rule. You have to change their timetable. Instead of sparing 95% of the time to carry out terror attacks and 5% of the time to hide, you have to change it so they will run and be in Iran and find and looking for shelters in 95% of the time, and only in 5% of the time they will carry out terror attacks. That's the game of the name of the game in fighting terrorists. So we invaded the West Bank, and right at the beginning in Bethlehem, 100 terrorists penetrated the most holy place, the Church of Nativity. They captured the Church of Nativity. Try to imagine that they captured the Taj Mahal Palace, which is sacred, important, significant, whatever. They took the staff as hostages, and they were there for almost, I think, 5 weeks, sorry. 5 weeks. It was not that complicated to fight back and to take prisoners or to kill all terrorists. The problem was for sure some of the hostages will be killed, and a huge damage to the Church of Nativity because they brought in explosives. So we started to negotiate with them. Negotiation, it takes time. Every week or every day or two, some of the staff members succeeded to escape because they took all food, everything. The hostages were really prisoners in a very low condition. And after 35 days, I remember Prime Minister Sharon was in the States, and he was about to meet with President Bush. And he called me there was a meeting over there with Prime Minister Sharon, Vice President of the United States, head of the CIA, and they consulted each other how to solve the problem before the meeting with President Bush and Sharon. So finally they called me at night and they said, Avi, we've decided that you have to negotiate with Yasser Arafat. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. And told me, you have to negotiate with Yasser Arafat because tomorrow it's the meeting between the Prime Minister and the President. I said, very well, you know our conditions. I'm not going to change them. We had 13 terrorists, arch-terrorists, who killed Israelis that we know exactly the names of the victims. And we insisted that all those 13 terrorists will be expelled from the Church of the Nativity to the hands of the Red Cross to European countries or Arab countries, Turkey and some Arab countries. 26 terrorists who are with blood on their hands will be deported to Gaza Strip, and the rest will go home. Which means 40% expelled, 60% go home. Go home terrorists, they're going home. But that was the best way to solve the problem. And they told me, all right, whatever you suggest, negotiate it please with Yasser Arafat. Now, I know Arafat very well. We had a lot of chats as head of Shin Bet. I knew he's awake this time. Don't ask me how. And, and sometimes, you know, it's an advantage when you know information. And I called him, and he knew that I'm supposed to call. And the conversation started in Arabic, like two old friends that haven't talked for a long time, and now they are talking about the sharks at the northern sea. Abi, كيف حالك? I'm in Arabic, you know, a chat at 2 o'clock in the morning. My whole family woke up, you know, then suddenly they heard Arabic at home, you know. And it's okay. How is the family? Asked me, as if we are, I'm telling you, on a vacation of the Caribbean. I said, well, Mr. Arafat, let's talk business. And we started to bargain about the name. Now, I knew from inner information that they wanted the 9 terrorists to be expelled. So he right away told me, Avi, well, you said 13. I think we are ready to expel 5. I said, listen, I'm not a businessman and I'm not a politician, although I was. But it's a deal, take it or leave it. I told my Prime Minister, and the President of the United States knows very well, I'm not going to bargain with you. It's tomorrow, 13 are going to European countries and Arab countries and Muslim countries, 26 to Gaza and the rest home. You understand what does mean? About 40 terrorists are going home. So, well, I think we shall go to sleep and we shall wake up in the morning and you'll come down a little bit and I'll come up a little bit and we solve the problem. I told him, Mr. Arafat, you can go to sleep. Anyway, I'm not going to sleep, but it's not going to be changed. These are the final numbers. And I will insist that these are the numbers. And we agree that that's going to be the end, and that's how the Church of Nativity issue was solved. That's one negotiation. The second one was very interesting and learned a very interesting story and a very interesting culture. At the beginning of Intifada, they launched mortar shells from Beit Lehem towards Jerusalem. Shimon Peres was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he met with the Palestinian leaders. It was the Speaker of the House, the right hand of Yasser Arafat today is the right hand of Mahmoud Abbas, Saib Barakat, and the third one was Jibril Rajoub, my counterpart in Shin Bet in the West Bank. And the reason why he met with them, they called him for an urgent meeting, Shimon Peres, because they told him that the arch-terrorist, there was an arch-terrorist who was behind the mortar shells, and President Bush called Yasser Arafat and told him, you have to arrest the arch-terrorist who's behind the mortar shells, otherwise the Israelis are going to get back to Beit Lehem. So Yasser Arafat promised him, I'm going to put him in jail. And they, a few days after, they called Shimon Peres to a meeting, and he called me from the meeting and said, Avi, join me immediately to the meeting, there is a very urgent situation. I asked him, what's the story? He told me the story. I said, Shimon, they are lying to you. He said, no, Avi, please join me to the meeting. So I joined him to the meeting at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, and there were sitting 3, and Shimon Peres and myself. And he told me, Avi, they claimed they arrested the guy. And I looked at the Speaker of the House, Abu Ala, a well-known person, and he told me, Avi, I'm glad to tell you that Atif Abayat, that's the name, he's in jail. I looked at him, I told him, you know he's not in jail, in Arabic. He didn't even argue with me. He looked at the right hand of Yasser Arafat, Saib Barakat, and told him, Saib, isn't he in jail? Now, trust me, he had no idea whom we were talking about. He's from Jericho. He's not familiar with the issue. But he's a liar with a style. And he said, definitely in jail. And right away he looked at Jibril Ajub and said, Jibril, isn't he in jail? Now Jibril is the professional person. He's my counterpart. And he was in a catch. Because he knew he's not in jail. Because the only person who can detain him and put him in jail is Jibril Ajub. Now he knew he's not in jail. More than that, he knew that I know that he's not in jail. And above all, he knew that I know that he knows that he's not in jail. So he was a little bit nervous, and they pushed him and said, Jibril, is he in jail? And he picked up the ultimative word for such occasion in Arabic. There is no translation in any other language. I don't know if it's in Hindu. There's no translation in any language. They asked him, Jibril, is he in jail? And he looked at them and looked at me and looked at them and looked at me and said, Yani.
Oh, okay.
Yani is a very essential word in Arabic. Yani means he's in jail. Yani means he's not in jail. Yani means everything in between. So that's whenever I say that we are fed up with the culture of Yani. We're fed up. We cannot accept anymore answers like Yani. The third story, I think it's the most indicating one. In 1995, January, Yitzhak Rabin was prime minister, and I was in charge of the Southern Division, and we started to suffer tough terror attacks, including suicide bombings. And he asked for a meeting with the heads of the Palestinian security apparatus. And Yasser Arafat confirmed it, and we, Shin Bet, we arranged the meeting in Tel Aviv in a special location, everything under cover. And they came, 3 leaders from the Gaza Strip, 3 leaders from the West Bank, because each one is connected with Yasser Arafat. They don't have one for both. So they used to come to a meeting 6, and each one used to brief by himself in a different channel the president of the Palestinian Authority. And Yitzhak Rabin talked to them. I had to translate because they forgot to bring a translator. And he told them that if they're not going to decide that they are a Palestinian Authority that has one law and only one gun for the whole Palestinian Authority, for internal security, without any exceptions, not a movement that is equipped with rifles or any other warfare tools. And he told them the story that post the establishment of the country in May 1948, the rebels at that time brought a vessel from France with rifles and ammunition. The vessel was named Altalena. And the vessel harbored in front of the coast of Tel Aviv. And the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense was the same person, David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, gave them an ultimatum. Either you take back the vessel to France, or you hand over the whole equipment from the vessel to the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces. Because we are now a country, and we have only one army that has only his guns. No guns to any other faction. And the rebels refused. And that's what Rabin is telling them. And he looked straight in their eyes, and I'm translating it, sentence after sentence, and he's telling them, and the Prime Minister gave an order to the Chief of Staff, and the Chief of Staff gave the order to the commander of the battery of cannons near the coast to open fire towards the vessel. And they opened fire, the vessel sank, and 16 Israelis, sailors, got killed. And Prime Minister Rabin looked straight in their eyes and told them, the commander of the battery of cannons was me. And he told them, the day that you'll decide that you have one gun for the Palestinian one authority, that will be the day that you'll be prepared to have your country. But if you are going to keep having too many armies, you'll never have an army, a state of your own. And they remember till today. I think it's three different stories, in my eyes very significant, about a mixture of politics and security and diplomatic issues that I'm afraid that the fact that they are, till today, 24 years after Oslo Agreement was signed, they are more split than they used to be before. They have more armies than they used to have before, and that's probably their main obstacle to continue. That's why we have to wait. We cannot change and decide instead of the Palestinians themselves.
Thank you very much. Can we just take two last questions because there isn't much more time, and then
Some of the students came late because they were stopped by the police on the road.
Oh,
So
dear.
they couldn't continue. Yeah, they were coming from campus. So they drove for 90 minutes. And they were stopped. So we don't want me to restrict now questions for you. Please feel free to
But
participate.
the first,
No, it was okay. They want.
no, you
No,
have been
actually,
attending.
please,
but-
switch on the mic. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
I'm audible, I guess. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I'm from JNU and I'm Meenakshi. I have three very brief questions. Netanyahu have always been criticized for his policy on settlement. Like mainstream scholars, even inside Israel, they have criticized, saying that it is a threat to the Israeli people itself in the long run. So, what is your take on that? Secondly, when we are talking about the defense system, the defense system is very strong, but hostage issue is still a problem, not just for Israel but for other countries also. But to be specific for Israel, because it has a policy not to negotiate with hostage takers. So, sir, personally, as your experience, how difficult is it to reconcile between domestic pressure and national security? And the third question, when we talk about Jerusalem, in 1993, the agreement between the Vatican and Israel, one of the most core argument was the tax redemption bill. But that has not yet been passed. So what is the internal debate inside the Knesset talking about Vatican and the assets relating to it inside Jerusalem?
About Jerusalem, about the Vatican, I'm not familiar with the details, so you'll forgive me. I don't want to give an answer just about issues that I'm not familiar with. About the settlements and about Netanyahu. Look, Netanyahu was prime minister between the years 1996 and 1999. He's the prime minister who signed the agreement about Hebron, Wye Plantation, Wye River agreement. So Netanyahu is deeply involved in, not in decisions, but in signing agreements on behalf of the state of Israel. It's not easy for him. He followed the Oslo agreement, although he didn't accept it as it is. But he is disciplined. We are a democratic country, as he said. And he knows as a prime minister, he cannot take the agreement that was signed by Prime Minister Rabin, continued by Prime Minister Peres, and say, I have nothing to do with it. So he continued. He went to Wye River and he signed an agreement about Hebron, which, trust me, it was not easy, neither for Netanyahu nor for the party he represents. And that's in 1996 to 1999, the time that previous the Intifada, but during very, very tough terror activities with car bombs, suicide bombers, buses exploded in the streets. It was very, very tough situation for him. We faced, under his capacity as prime minister, I remember in Jerusalem, within 1 month, 2 suicide bombers in one event in the market, 3 suicide bombers, one in a row, in the heart of Jerusalem. But then when he lost the election in 1999 and Ehud Barak came, Ehud Barak continued the same way, and they continued into July 2000 when he went to Camp David, honestly trying to sign an agreement with the Palestinians, with Yasser Arafat. Everybody knows that what Ehud Barak, the Prime Minister of Israel, offered to the Palestinians in July 2000 in Camp David under the American umbrella was not offered by any Israeli leader before or after. It was something that nobody understands today, let alone nobody understood that time. What happened that Yasser Arafat refused to go forward with the offer given by Ehud Barak? I have many assessments. It's too long to talk about it now. But one point I may raise: neither Yasser Arafat nor Mahmoud Abbas, none of them was and is ready to accept what Yitzhak Rabin told that I just told you. They both are scared to death to face under their shift a civil war. They were not prepared for it. They thought that if they are going to accept the plan or the deal or the agreement and to sign it, it's going to arouse a civil war. And that's why they refused. And if the Americans were shocked, the Americans in July 2000 were shocked why Yasser Arafat rejected what was put on the table in front of him and in front of the Americans. The Americans couldn't believe that they are getting from Israelis such a generous offer. But that spilled milk. After that, the second Intifada broke out. And here lies the second problem, that Israeli settlements in the West Bank, clusters and others, were severely attacked on the roads. We've lost people in those areas, and Palestinian security troops did nothing. Not just did nothing, in some cases even hosted arch terrorists in their prison, so-called prison, to give them shelter, because they knew that we are not going to do anything in their headquarters. And for us it was too much. That's why we have launched a defensive shield operation, as I mentioned before, the operation to get back. Now, the State of Israel evacuated in Gaza Strip in 2005 the whole Jewish settlements in 3 days. I mean, we know if there is a solution like we did in Sinai. We took out all Israelis from settlements in Sinai. I don't think that that's the problem that we are facing with the Palestinians. We are trying to build in areas that we know will remain under Israeli sovereignty. Nobody will block Israeli construction in Jerusalem, as I told you. There's no way. Because there's no way that Jerusalem will be back to the line of 67, as I have just described. About the concession between security and versus social pressure. In Israel, I don't know how it's in India. In Israel, every male or female at the age of 18 has to go to the army. It used to be 3 years, now it's going to be 2.5 years. It's not easy. You started your academic career at the age of 18, 19. We are starting it at the age of 22, the minimum. We are going for 3 years to the army at the age of 21. Then people for 1 year come to India to see to see Goa and other places, Kashmir, whatever. And at the age of 22, they are going to university. It's a very, very complicated situation. When you are graduating for master, some of them are just starting. And they have to get married, and they have to raise a family, parallel to studying, working. It's not easy. And they have to go to reserve. It's about 31 months a year. It's not easy. But here comes the heritage. You know, I'm repeating it because some people didn't hear it at the beginning. We are continuing a history of 3,300 years. We are speaking the same language that we spoke 3,300 years, the same language from the Bible. We are named. My name is Abraham Moshe. Abraham Moshe, two names mentioned at the beginning of the Bible. And we are proud of it, to speak the same language. I don't know how many countries you have that the people are speaking the same language for 3,300 years. We know what does it mean to be a minority in other countries when the Nazis decided to erase the Jewish people. And they didn't have anyone to call for help. My family was murdered till almost the last one of them. It's about, my father had 5 brothers and sisters, my mother 9. All of them got killed, some of them in front of their eyes. Let alone the parents. You know, it's a horrible history. I went to my parents' hometown in Poland, in Ukraine. It used to be Poland. Just less than a year ago. Just to see where did it happen and how. I'm telling you, take a small village here, a farmer's village, and try to imagine that in one day, 22nd of August 1942, all Jewish people from the village that were concentrated in a ghetto, a closed area, for several months, one day were taken for 1 kilometer to a mass grave, and 6 after 6 after 6 after 6 people got shot by the German Gestapo. In one day, they eliminated 5,000 Jews, including my grandparents, uncles, whatever. And for us, it's something that we do understand. We cannot, in the crazy Middle East that I just described, we cannot allow ourselves to put first priority anything before security. We don't have the privilege to lose one battle. It's impossible. That's why we are, I myself, I dedicated all my life to security. Since the age of 18, I did nothing except security and parliament and ministry. And it's going to be continued. And I think that it's, for us, it's well understood. It comes in our blood, and we have values. We have the 10 amendments that we keep them till today. And we're trying to make sure that we shall be strong enough, but parallel to that, we'll build our country. And I refer to the last question about negotiations with terrorists. It's a heated debate in Israel. And for me, as someone who put in jail thousands of terrorists, some hundreds in graves, but thousands of terrorists in jail. we had to target down terrorists when we didn't have any option to arrest them. But first best is detaining and questioning with them. That gives you information, which is the best tool in fighting terrorists. Second best is targeted killings. Because from a dead man, you don't have any information. I don't know how in India, in Israel, we don't have any tools to take information from a dead man. And that's why in Israel it's a heated debate when we had to release one soldier from captivity after 5.5 years, and we had to release 1,000 terrorists. You cannot imagine what happened. You know, we are, Israelis have a very interesting image of debating among themselves, you know. There is a joke that Air France is taking off from Paris to Johannesburg, above the jungles. And there is a cut at the two engines, and the pilots landed in a gap in the jungle. Thank God they landed with no crashing, and all 200 passengers were taken safe and sound outside the airplane, the fuselage. The only problem was that the gap in the forest belonged to cannibals. So the cannibals collected the whole 200 French people, brought them to the chief, and asked, "Chief, what are you going to do with them?" He asked them, "Who are they?" "French people." French people, he thought for a while and said, "We're going to feed them a whole week and then a party." A few months later, a Lufthansa jet with 300 Germans, same route, same problem of the engines, same cut of the engines, but same safe landing. The 300 passengers were taken by the cannibals, same cannibals, were taken, brought to the chief, and they asked the chief, "What are you going to do with them?" "Who are they?" "Germans." He thought for a while and said, "We are going to feed them a whole week and then a party." A year later, El Al jet, jumbo jet, 400 passengers flying to Johannesburg. Same problem, good pilots from the former Air Force, landed safe and sound, and 400 Israelis were brought out of the plane. The problem, same cannibals. The cannibals collect them all together, came to the chief, and said, "Chief, 400 today. What are you going to do with them?" "Who are they?" "Israelis." He thought for a while and said, "Party tonight." "Chief, we're not going to feed them a whole week and then a party?" No, these are Israelis. If we're going to wait a week, they're going to eat each other. That's the Israeli joke. But the true story is that a few years ago, when the soldier in captivity was released, Gilad Shalit, his name, every Israeli knows the name Gilad Shalit. When he was released, when he was released, 4 El Al flights were in the air. The captains in 4 passenger aircraft got the message from their headquarters. They opened the microphone and said, nothing about the weather, about the route, just said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Gilad Shalit is back home." All passengers applauded. It was a very happy situation. Now the passengers who are not Israelis, they asked what happened. They told them the story about Gilad Shalit that was released. And they asked, why wasn't he released till today? They said because they insisted to release 1,000 terrorists, and Israel agreed to release 1,000 terrorists. That's why we got him today. So the non-Israelis asked, so why you are so happy to release 1,000 terrorists for one Israeli soldier. I think that's for Israel. In Israel, although it's a heated debate, I'm telling you the majority will support it. Because we, in our history, I'm taking myself as a soldier, we used to cross borders, we used to take risks, we used to be sent by our commanders. We went deep inside, but we knew that if, God forbid, something happens, our country will do literally everything to bring us back, dead or alive. And when we started to send other soldiers or security men, they knew that when we send them, we shall bring them back by all means. So that's, I know it's different than other countries. I know the Americans are thinking differently, but that's the advantage or the disadvantage of a small country like the State of Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, right.
Thank you for your generous insights and time and being so generous with your time with the stories as well. So can I request Dr. Kibraj to do the honors? Thank you for coming to the university. I know many people didn't get a chance to hear his lecture. There's a little tea arranged for us. So please, you can mingle during that time.
This is a university scout, all the schools of the university. Thank you very much for coming and giving us very privileged conversation.